Dear students, welcome to the economics class. Today's Indian economy on the eve of independence. This is what the topic today we are going to study. In this we will study about demographic and occupational structure. Okay, when Britishers ruled our country, what was the demographic and occupational structure in our economy? That is what today's topic we are going to study about this. Okay, first of all we will study about what is the demography. Demography is the statistical study of human populations. Demography says more about the human population. Demography examines the size, structure and movements of populations over space and time. Okay, so today we will study about the demographic condition in India. So that is the main topic we are going to study. Okay, so demography is the statistical study of human populations. So what was the human populations in India and their how they measured Indian population, etc. we are going to study in this part. Demographic conditions during the British rule exhibited all features of a stagnant and backward Indian economy. So demography here you can see the demography here. Here the word demography is there. Demography means the study of a human population. That is what. Okay, so in this area we are going to study about the first official census. The first official census was conducted in the year 1881. Okay, it was around 150 years ago this study happened. The first official census happened in 1881. The first official census took place. So it happened. The first official census was conducted in the year 1881. Though suffering from certain limitations of the census revealed unevenness in India's population growth. This after this the study of this 1881 about the census, after this census study we came to know about the India's population growth we understood. From 1881 onwards the census operations were carried out after every 10 years. After every 10 years the census operations took place. The first census in India took place or happened in 1881. So demography is the study of Indian population. Demography is the study of population. It happened in India. The first census took place 1881. This date you need to remember. Okay, after that in every 10 years the census operations are taking place. We can move on to the next point. In 1921, year of the Great Divide, before 1921 India was in the first stage of demographic transition. Transition means a change. Okay, so in 1921, year of the Great Divide happened. Before 1921, India was in the first stage of demographic transition. The second stage of transition began after 1921. Okay, so we can divide this census study before 1921 and after 1921. Before 1921, that is known as the first stage of demographic transition. First stage of demographic transition was before 1921. Before 1921. After the second stage of transition started after 1921. After 1921, the second transition started. So the year 1921 is described as the year of the Great Divide. We can say this 1921 was the Great Divide. That was the time for Great Divide for the census, when we consider about the census, so this date is very important. 1921 is very important. Okay, so we can divide as before 1921 and after 1921. After 1921, the real exact study started about the demography study. Okay, the calculations and measurement exactly took place. The demographic condition during the colonial rule is described in the following points. So you know that actually before 1947 India was the colony and the Britishers were ruling our country. So we will study about all demographic situations and what was the demographic situation in India, that we will study. So the first point is high birth rate and death rate. That time high birth rate and death rate were there. Birth rate refers to number of children born per thousands in a year. Per thousand people. Okay, how many children took birth and how many children born at that time. That is what actually we will study. High birth rate and death rate. Birth rate refers to number of children born per thousands in a year. Death rate refers to number of people dying per thousand persons in a year. Okay, among thousand persons, how many persons die in a year? And among thousand people, how many newborn babies are there? All those actually we need to study, we study. That is what actually in those days what happened, that we will study. High birth rate and death rate. Birth rate refers to number of children born per thousand in a year. Death rate refers to number of people dying per thousand persons in a year. Both birth rate and death rate were very high at nearly 48 and 40 per thousand respectively. At that time, more people were dying. Okay, that there the rate was 40% of people. 40 people died among 1,000 people. That was the rate. So the second is extremely low literacy rate. The overall literacy rate was very low level. Literacy rate was less than 16%. Only 16% of people were educated at that time in India. Out of this, the female literacy level was at a negligible low of 7%. See, out of this 16%, what was the level of female literacy? That was only 7%. 7% of women were studying in India. So in this here we are studying about the birth rate and death rate. Okay, birth rate was very high, 48, and death rate was 40. So that was the education, the literacy rate. When we come to the education, the literacy rate was only 16%, and 7% females literacy was there at that time. So these points you need to remember. Okay, it's for your general understanding. This you need to understand and remember. Then poor health facilities. Other point we need to remember is that poor health facility was there. There were no good health facilities. Public health facilities were either unavailable to large mass of population, or when available were highly inadequate. As a result, water and airborne diseases were widespread and took a huge toll in life. Many people died due to the lack of proper health awareness programs and health facilities in India. There were no enough good hospitals in India. There were so at that time. So more people died in that time. Poor health facilities. Public health facilities were either unavailable. They were not available in many places, especially in rural villages, rural places, and in villages there were no good health facilities. Large mass of population were suffering and so inadequate was the situation. There were no proper health facilities. As a result, water and airborne diseases were widespread at that time. More widespread diseases were that time. Okay, airborne diseases were spreading rapidly there. Okay, the point you need to remember: poor health facilities. Public health facilities were either unavailable to large mass of population, or when available were highly inadequate. In some places it was available, but it was not sufficient level or inadequate. As a result, water and airborne diseases were widespread and took a huge toll in life. Means many people lost their lives. Okay, many people died at that time. Another next point we need to remember: high infant mortality rate. Infant mortality rate refers to number of infants dying before reaching 1 year of age per 1,000 live births in a year. Okay, so out of this 1,000 live births, how many children died at that time? That was actually high infant mortality rate. Infant mortality rate was very high. More newborn babies were dying at that time. The infant mortality rate was quite alarming, about 218 per 1,000, in contrast to the infant mortality rate of 44% per 1,000 in 2011. In 2011, our only 44 newborn babies died. But when we compare with this Britishers ruling time, how many children were dying at that time? Newborn babies, 218 babies per 1,000 died at that time. So we can say high infant mortality rate was there. Okay, the high infant mortality rate, out of 1,000 newborn babies, around 218 babies died. But whereas what happened in 2011, only 44 babies died. So the infant mortality rate was very high when Britishers ruled our country. Okay, so these 2 points you need to remember. One is poor health facilities. Another one was the high infant mortality rate. 2 points we studied in this area. You need to remember these 2 points. Okay, the poor health facilities, and the health facilities where there were no proper health facilities. Okay, in some places it was available, but highly inadequate. It was not enough sufficient. Okay, it was not sufficient, or it was, we can say it was inadequate. Okay, then infant mortality was very high at that time. Now it is very less. Okay, these 2 points you need to remember. Check the next step: low life expectancy, lifespan. Okay, life expectancy refers to the average number of years for which people are expected to live. To like life expectancy was also very low, 44 years, in contrast to the present 68 years. Nowadays we can say an average man can live up to at least 68 years. More age he can live there, and more years he can live. But at that time it was generally only 44 years, in contrast to the present 68 years. Now see, around 70 years a normal man can live in India. So that is what our lifespan, normal lifespan. Low life expectancy was that time. People didn't live long. At that time. Okay, it was mainly most of the people lived up to 44 years, until 44 years. After that they died. Okay, so in nowadays what is happening? The lifespan expanded up to 68 years. Now more than that also, 80 years easily one man can live. 80 years, 90 years, so many people are living like that. Then widespread poverty. At that time poverty was widespread. Okay, Many people experienced poverty. Many people experienced poverty. That is what the point, main point we are going to study in this. There was no reliable data about the extent of poverty, but there is no doubt that extensive poverty prevailed in India during the colonial period. The overall standard of living of common people in India was very low, and there was widespread poverty in the country. It can be concluded that British rule was the main reason to worsen the profile of India's population. What happened? See, the widespread poverty was there actually. People were in poor. They experienced poverty. Okay, there were no enough food production. So we have already studied that the Britishers were forcing Indian people to produce cash crops rather than food crops. So Indian people suffered and they experienced poverty. There was no reliable data about the extent of poverty, but there were many famines in India at that time when Britishers ruled. Okay, especially the Bengal famine that is really very famous. Okay, but there is no doubt that extensive poverty prevailed in India during the colonial period. Overall standard of living of common people in India was very low. The standard of living was very low. There were no good schools, there were no good hospitals, and there were no enough food. The overall standard of living of common people in India was very low, and there was widespread poverty in India. It can be concluded that British rule was the main reason to worsen the profile of India's population. India's population got this much exploded because of Britishers' poor management. They didn't provide anything better way to the Indian citizens. That is also one of the reason for India's population explosion. Okay, many people died at the age of 44 years. So every family members, what happened actually? In every families there were more children then, because more the death rate of newborn babies were at that time very high. So more babies were in every families. That is what actually made India's population very high. That all those points you need to remember. Low life expectancy was there, so that also forced the Indian people to have more babies. Okay. And the another one is, and widespread poverty was there. There were no enough food, sufficient food in the market. Okay, there were no enough food, sufficient food. People experienced the famine. Okay, the standard of living was very low standard, low level. There were no good schools, there were no good hospitals, etc. You need to remember all these 2-3 points. You need to remember. Then occupational structure we can check. So until now we were studying about demography. Okay, demography is the study of population. We studied about the population. India's population was population death rate we studied, also birth rate we studied. Birth rate was very high, and death rate was very high. So everything happened. Birth rate was very high, but the child death rate was also very high. Okay, that also we studied. There were no enough food. People experienced famine, that we have already studied. Okay, then there were no good health facilities, there were no good schools, there were no good hospitals, that also we studied. Now we can study about occupational structure. Occupational structure refers to distribution of working person across different industries and sectors. What is occupational structure? What is occupation? Occupation means work, job, etc. Okay, the people earn something for their livelihood. Okay, by which, okay, so occupational structure refers to distribution of working persons, that is occupational structure says about working persons. Occupational structure refers to distribution of working persons across different industries and sectors. There were many industries in India, especially cotton industry, silk industry, and handicrafts industries were there. So we can check what was the percentage, how many people worked in these industries. Okay, during the colonial period, we were the colony, Britain ruled us. Okay, so during the colonial period, the occupational structure of India showed little sign of change. Okay, the state of occupational structure during the British rule can be summarized as under. See, we can see what happened. Predominance of primary occupation. The agriculture sector was accounted for the largest share of workforce with approximately 75%. 75% of India's population were engaged in the field of agriculture. More people were working in the field. Okay, so they were doing farming, agriculture. Okay, that happened during the time of British rule. The manufacturing and the service sectors accounted for the remaining 23%. Very less percentage was manufacturing sector. The productivity, mainly the industries and other services sector accounted for the remaining 23%. Majority of the people were engaged in agriculture. 75% of our population were engaged in agriculture and only 23% were engaged in industries. So they were working in an industrial sector. Regional variation, another striking aspect was the growing regional variation that we can check. So what is the regional variation? The states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and West Bengal witnessed a decline in dependence of workforce on the agricultural sector with a commensurate increase in the manufacturing and the service sector. The states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and West Bengal witnessed a decline in dependence of workforce on the agriculture sector with a commensurate increase in the manufacturing sector and service sector. All those places actually more people engaged with the service sector and the manufacturing sector. The states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and West Bengal witnessed a decline in dependence of workforce on the agriculture sector with a commensurate increase in the manufacturing sector. In all those places actually you can see more industries and more service sector and more workforce. They engaged with more industrial work. Okay, but in other states like Madhya Pradesh, then Gujarat, Rajasthan, all those, Haryana, all those, Uttar Pradesh, all those states engaged more in the field of agriculture. But in all those places, especially Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and West Bengal got more industries. Okay, so people engaged with more industrial work. Okay, and they also engaged with service sector. Okay. However, during the same time there had been an increase in the share of workforce in agricultural states such as Orissa, Rajasthan and Punjab. So, all these, the above mentioned states, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra and West Bengal, there we can see more industrialization and more people engaged with the service sector and industrial sector. Whereas, Orissa, Rajasthan, Punjab, more people engaged with agriculture. So, agriculture, more people engaged in the field of agriculture. This happened. These are the variations happened in India. More South Indian states more promoted industrialization and the people they engaged with more service sector and industries, whereas the northern states like Orissa, Rajasthan and Punjab etc. Engaged more in the field of agriculture. So that happened. That is what actually you needed to remember. Then we can go through the infrastructure development. The infrastructure facilities during the British rule were very poor. The Britishers didn't promote actually industries in India, more industries in India. Their ultimate aim was to promote Britain's economy. Therefore, they have taken raw materials from our country to Britain. Okay. So, their ultimate aim was to promote Britain's economy. Okay, they have taken the raw materials from India to their country. After that, they brought finished goods from that country to here and supplied here more finished goods. Okay, they de-promoted our exports, finished goods exports, but they promoted only raw materials to Britain, mainly to Britain. Okay, some efforts were made to develop basic infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, water transport, post and telegraph, etc. We can see some changes in the field of roads, transportation, especially railways, ports, ports, you know that actually, water transport, then post and telegraphs, all those areas you can see some changes. Why? They developed, they promoted roads, railways, ports, water transport, etc. Why? Because they wanted to exploit India's wealth to Britain. They wanted to, they looted more and plundered more wealth from India to Britain. They wanted to rule India. That is why they, for their administrative purpose, they wanted to develop roads, railways, ports, water transport, post and telegraph. They developed more ports in India because they wanted to take Indian goods to their country. So waterways they developed. They also developed railways, roads, because then only they can travel all over India and rule and make war with other countries also. They can rule our country. So they have invested money in this field, roads, railways, ports, water transport, etc. But the main aim, motive behind such infrastructure development was to serve various colonial interests. Their ultimate aim was to develop their own economy, their own power in India. They wanted to administrate their more power in India. That is why they have developed all these above mentioned ways, especially roads, railways, ports, water transport, etc. But the main motive behind such infrastructure development was to serve various colonial interests. Their interest was to take India's wealth to their country. That was their ultimate interest. The state of infrastructure was inherited on the British rule is discussed below. So we can go through the below mentioned topic and understand what was the infrastructure and its situation. Roads. The colonial administration could not accomplish much on construction of roads due to scarcity of fund. Even colonial administration was lacking enough fund. They were not having enough fund. They have taken all funds to their country, Britain. Okay, they didn't kept much fund in India. They didn't invest much fund for the developments. So they didn't develop every roads in India. Only main roads, some chief main roads they have developed. The colonial administration could not accomplish much on construction of roads due to the scarcity of funds. Okay, the roads that were built primarily served the interest of mobilizing the army and shifting raw materials. They have invested, they developed some roads in India, they developed railways in India, and they also developed some ports in India, water transport system in India, post and telegraphs in India. Why? Because their ultimate aim was to mobilizing the army and shifting the raw materials. To where? To Britain. They can easily collect the raw materials from all parts of India and they can take all those things to their country. That was their ultimate aim. There always remained an acute shortage of all weather roads to reach out to rural areas during the rainy season. Of course, there were no enough roads. Okay, all weather roads were not at that time. Okay, there were always remained an acute shortage. Acute shortage means there were no sufficient, it was lacking. Okay, acute shortage of all weather roads to reach out to rural areas. There were no good roads in rural areas. Villages were completely isolated away from the cities. There were no connectivity. That is what actually there were acute shortage of all weather roads to reach out to rural areas during the rainy season, especially in the rainy season. There were no good roads. As a result, people living in these areas suffered badly during natural calamities and famines. What happened? Often Indian villages experienced famines and calamities, natural calamities like earthquake, then droughts, floods, etc. All those are known as natural calamities, catastrophe, and famines, etc. The people experienced. Due to the acute shortage of all weather roads, people suffered, especially the village people suffered lots. There were no good schools, there were no good hospitals, there were no good roads. Okay. So all these points you need to remember. Infrastructure development, they didn't invest much. They have invested in certain areas that is only for the development of their own interest, only for their own interest. They wanted to rule India their own way, and that is why they have developed such some railway transports, water transport, etc., so that they can control this subcontinent better way. That is why they have done all those things. You need to remember. Then next step is the most important contribution of the British rule was to introduce railways in India. This point you need to remember. Okay, India got one of the best railways in the world. That is because of the Britishers only. Actually, even though they made it for their administrative purpose, but it is one of the best investment they have done. The most important contribution of the British rule was to introduce railways in India in 1950. This date you need to remember. In 1950, the Britishers introduced Indian Railway. The railways affected the structure of the Indian economy in two important ways. Why Indian Railway is significant once in Indian economy. Railways enabled people to undertake a long distance level. It broke geographical and cultural barriers and promoted national integration. Railway, after the inauguration, after coming the Indian Railway, what happened? People moved freely here and there. They traveled all over India. People moved from south to north and north to south. So what happened? It broke geographical and cultural barriers and promoted national integration, so that people understood what is India. Okay, they understood the different culture, different languages, their different celebrations and everything they understood. It broke Indian Railway, connected people together. It broke geographical and cultural barriers and promoted national integration. So after that, people felt one India, India is one. They felt that actually they have seen the whole India. They understood the geographical and cultural barriers they have broken, and the national integration, the unity came. India's the feeling of Mother India feelings more promoted after the coming of Indian Railway, because more people traveled India, they experienced the different cultures and the geographical and cultural barriers they have broken. It enhanced the commercialization of Indian agriculture. It also enhanced the developed commercialization of agriculture, which adversely affected the comparative self-sufficiency of the village economies in India. It enhanced the commercialization of Indian agriculture. Once the railway started, what happened? The raw materials they collected, Britishers collected as fast as they can. They have collected. After that, what happened? They also promoted commercialization of agriculture. Then what happened? That happened once the commercialization of agriculture, they promoted Indian villages felt which adversely affected the comparative self-sufficiency of the village economies. Indian villages felt shortage of food. There were no enough food. Famine experienced. There were no enough food because the commercialization of agriculture happened very fastly. Okay, commercialization of agriculture. That is why Britishers could collect. Once they started Indian Railway, the Britishers could collect India's raw materials, cash crops from far places to Britain. They could collect because railway line was there, so they could collect it. So that railways, the coming of a railway adversely affected the comparative self-sufficiency of the village economies in India. Okay, that what happened. So I hope you understood all these points. Railways also promoted the foreign trade, but it benefited the Britishers more than the Indians. Railways promoted foreign trade. Okay, foreign trade railways promoted, but that benefited to Britishers only, not for India, because Britishers were ruling as. The construction of railways led to huge economic losses to the Indian economy. They have collected money from India, Indian money they used for the development of railways. It led to huge economic losses to the Indian economy. At least this they invested in India, or that money is here. Otherwise, they could have taken all this money to the Britain. Okay. Anyway, they developed Indian Railway. That is for them big thanks, because they have invested a lot of money. That is Indian money only. There is nothing special in that. Then also they have developed a huge network Indian railways and railways. The Indian Railway is one of the very popular railways in the world. Okay, we have fourth level, or for the fourth largest railways in the world we have. Okay, that is actually. So the construction of railways led to huge economic losses to the Indian economy. That is what they say. Air and water transport we can check then. So they developed, Britishers developed railways. They developed railways, okay, because they wanted to take Indian raw materials, raw materials and other minerals they wanted to take to their country, and they wanted to rule our country, this subcontinent they wanted to rule. That is why they developed Indian Railway. Then air and water transport we can check. British government took measures for developing the water and air transport. However, their development was far from satisfactory. Air and water transport development. Air and water transport means what? Airways, and water transport means boat service, etc. Okay, the British government took measures for developing the water and air transport. However, their development was far from satisfactory. So it was not a satisfactory one. They didn't perform it very well. They could not do it well. There were no satisfactory in that. Inland waterways proved to be uneconomical, as in the case of the coast canal on the Orissa coast. This canal was built at the huge cost, but it failed to compete with the railways. Okay, in Orissa they have mud canal, water canal, but it could not compete with the railways, and finally canal had to be abandoned. After that they discarded it, they didn't use it, abandoned the project. Okay, they finally canal had to be abandoned, they didn't use it properly. So inland waterways proved to be uneconomical. They have spent a lot of money for the creation of this coast canal on the Orissa coast. This canal was built at the huge cost, but it failed to compete with the railways, and finally canal had to be abandoned. They didn't use it, they abandoned. Abandoned means discard. They didn't cancelled, you can say, they abandoned. Okay, they didn't use it properly. Then communication we can check. Post and telegraphs were the most popular means of communication. Post and telegraph, this you need to remember. Post and telegraph, postal service and telegraph, okay, were the most popular means of communication. The introduction of the expensive system of electric telegraph in India served the purpose of maintaining law and order. So this postal and telegraph service, for communication, telegraph, they used for administrative purpose. Okay, electric telegraph in India served the purpose of maintaining law and order. So law and order maintaining करने के लिए ये लोग telegraph को use किया. Okay, so for maintaining the law and order in a state, okay, so they used the benefit of telegraph. The postal services dispatch serving as usual public purpose remained all tough inadequate. The postal services despite serving a usual public purpose remained all true inadequate. So it was also inadequate, could not do very well. It could not do very well. The postal service, despite serving a useful public service, remained also inadequate. Even though it served for public, it also was not in a satisfactory level. It could not do well. It was not enough or sufficient. Its performance was inadequate. Okay, that's what actually. The postal service, despite serving a useful public service, remained also inadequate. It was not doing well. That's all. So my dear students, so we have gone through many various reasons why and what was the why India's economic situation didn't perform well, and how people experienced the British rule in India, and what was the situation in the level of in the field of communication, transportation, and in the field of education, industrialization, etc. we have studied. We also studied about the demography in India, demography situation we studied. Okay, so I hope you understood this topic well. Today we are going to do Indian economy on the eve of independence. So today we are checking about the main reason for decline of handicraft industry. What made the handicraft industries decline? That is what actually we are going to study today. The main reason for decline of India's renowned handicraft industry was the introduction of discriminatory tariff policy by the colonial government. We have already studied that actually the British government implemented various kinds of economic policies and rules and regulations that actually declined India's economic growth. That was the main reason. The discriminatory tariff policy that also destroyed India's handicraft industry. Majority of our population, major part of our population was engaged in agriculture, but some part of India was actually doing industries, and some people were doing handicrafts too. Handicraft industry was doing well at that time. So they destroyed that too because of their new tariff policy by the colonial government. Britain was ruling as we were the colony, and they were ruling as around 200 years. So their new economic policies, rules and regulations that destroyed India's agriculture as well as handicraft industries. Okay. So, this policy allowed free export of raw materials from India and free import of final goods of British industry to India. Because of their new tariff policy or economic policy, what happened? They actually allowed free export of raw materials from India. Actually, India was their market. They wanted to sell their finished goods in India, and also they wanted to take more raw materials from India to their country, and their ultimate aim was to develop Britain's economy. That was their ultimate aim. Okay. Then what happened? So the free export of raw materials from India and free import of final goods of British industry to India, but heavy duty was imposed on the export of Indian handicrafts. They didn't allow free export from India. They put more or heavy duty. They imposed heavy duty, means tax. They imposed on the export of Indian handicrafts. So, it destroyed India's handicrafts industries. These points you need to remember. Indian economy on the eve of independence, that is what actually we are going to study, and we are studying now. So, Britishers ruled India and they destroyed India's economy completely, totally they have destroyed. And mainly their policies, very often they created new economic policy that destroyed economic policy as well as tariff policy and land reforms they created. All those was really destroying India's economic growth. Okay. Here what we are studying, the reason for decline of handicrafts industry. Handicrafts industry, how they destroyed because of their new tariff policy. The colonial government destroyed India's handicrafts industry. The policy allowed free export. What was the new tariff policy? Free export of raw materials from India. Raw materials only we can export mainly, because they can take raw materials. Major part of our raw materials went to Britain. Then they made new product, finished goods in Britain. After that, all those finished products they brought to India and sold in Indian market. So our people used to buy their product. They had to buy their product that they have done. We cannot export anything. In case if we export something, then heavy duty was imposed on the export of Indian handicrafts items. As a result, what was the result? So, as a result, Indian markets were full of finished goods. So many finished goods came to Indian market, and surplus of goods came to Indian markets from Britain, which were low priced. It led to the decline of Indian handicrafts. So many finished goods came to Indian market from Britain. All those actually destroyed Indian handicrafts industry because of their tariff policy. New tariff rates amount or their tariff policy they have implemented. Because of Britain's new tariff policy, Indian handicrafts industry had experienced its decline. So that is what actually the main points we studied in this part. Okay, reason for decline of Indian handicraft industry during the time of Britishers rule in India. Then what happened? You need to remember this point: tariff policy, new tariff policy implemented, imposed by Britishers, destroyed India's handicrafts industry. Okay, that is the main point that you need to remember. They also put heavy duty. They put more heavy duty on the export of Indian handicrafts items to other countries. Okay, export means exporting or anything to other country, that is what actually. So as a result, Indian markets were full of finished goods from Britain. So Britain's finished goods came to India, and it was easily available in Indian markets. Okay, that was actually, they destroyed handicrafts industry in India. Okay, so we can move on to the next point. Adverse effect on, this is one word. Okay, adverse effect, effects of decline of handicraft industry. So what are the main reasons and what made Indian handicrafts industries decline? Decline of handicraft industries adversely affected the Indian economy in the following ways. Adverse effect of decline of handicraft industry. Okay, handicrafts industries decline. How India's economy got affected because of the decline of handicrafts industry. Okay, handicrafts industry badly affected Indian economy's growth. How? Because because of the decline of handicraft industries, adversely affected, this point you need to remember, adversely affected the Indian economy in the following ways. Okay, so what were the ways? High level of unemployment. The decline of handicrafts industry created lot of unemployment. Many people lost their employment. That was the employment. Many people were working in the field of handicrafts industry. Artisans were there, expert people were there. So only because of new tariff policy and British government's new economic policy and tariff policy, many people experienced unemployment because a handicrafts industry decline happened only because of the new tariff policy by Britishers. Okay, in India, while they were ruling in India or during the time of Britishers rule, Indian handicrafts industry got destroyed or declined. The decline of Indian handicrafts resulted in unemployment. Many people lost their job. Many people were working in the field of handicrafts and in the field of agriculture. Mainly in the field of agriculture, rest of some other people were working in the field of handicrafts. They too lost their job only because of Britishers' wrong Indian policy. In India, they created wrong economic policies. The displaced artisans were forced to take up agriculture. Then what happened? The handicrafts industry found its worst time when Britishers ruled. Why? Because Britishers implemented new economic policy that totally destroyed handicrafts industry. Then the people, unemployment took place. Then the people who lost their job in the field of handicrafts industry moved to the agriculture field. More people again came to the field of agriculture for their livelihood, because for living they want to earn something, they wanted to earn some money, then only they can live better way. This increased the burden of population on villages and overcrowding in agriculture. Due to the decline of handicraft industry, more people moved to the agriculture field. Then what happened? This increased the burden of population on villages and overcrowding in agriculture. More people came into the field of agriculture, more people engaged in agriculture, because many people lost their job in handicraft industry. Then majority of its people came to the agriculture field. Okay. Import of finished goods. What happened? Finished goods, more finished goods came from the Britain. More finished goods came from the Britain. The Indian made goods could not withstand the foreign competition of machine made cheap goods. So, in Britain, actually Britain made new and varieties of finished goods, okay, with a high quality that came to Indian market, The Indian made goods could not withstand the foreign competition of machine made cheap goods. Britain's machine made product came to Indian market, and India's products could not withstand the foreign competition. That is actually, it encouraged the import of manufactured goods from Britain. The finished goods, more finished goods, machine made goods came from Britain. So more people, our people were liking more goods from Britain because of its fine quality, okay, its proper finishing. The finishing was good, okay, perfect quality product came from Britain. So Britain's machine made cheap goods came more into Indian market. So Indian goods could not withstand with all those foreign imported goods. All these points you need to remember. You just go through the main points. Then unemployment happened, agriculture also declined, handicrafts declined. Due to the decline of handicrafts industry, many people came to the agriculture field. So more people engaged in agriculture. Another thing is that more finished goods came from Britain to India, and Indian markets were surplus with all those finished goods from Britain. That is what actually the main points you needed to remember. Then the next point, lack of capital goods industries. Capital goods industries. Capital goods means human resources development that was not properly took place in India during the time of Britishers rule. Capital goods industry refer to those industries which can produce machine tools. Okay, this is also machine tools is also coming in the category of capital goods. Lack of capital goods industries. Capital goods industries refer to those industries which can produce machine tools which are in turn used for producing articles for current consumption. Capital resources are there. So these are actually physical goods, capital goods. Okay. So capital resources means human beings development and giving proper training to the human resources. Okay. A country without proper human resources cannot do well. So we also wanted to develop machine tools. The country wants to produce machine tools as well as human resources. We wanted to get a development in the field of technology as well as the development of human resources we wanted to do. Development of human resources means proper education we want to give, better training. We need professional as well as skilled laborers in our country who can use and produce machines properly. The people, we need such type of technicians who can use machine tools very well. Okay, so that didn't happen at that time. Lack of capital goods industries were not here. That time the capital goods industry was not sufficient in our country. Okay, there were no proper machine tools producing industries in our country, which are in turn used for producing articles for current consumption. So we had no enough proper industries. We had some industries, but they were not producing exactly the machine tools. What they were doing, they were making some simple tools for the current consumption, day to day activities, mainly for the development of agriculture. Okay, agriculture tools they were making, but for the development of industries, there were no good machineries or tools in India. During the British rule, there was hardly any capital goods industry to promote further industrialization in India. What happened during the time of Britishers' rule? We had no enough industries which can promote further industrialization in India. If we wanted to promote more industries in India, then what we want? We want more such industries which can produce machines and other tools for further development. So, further development is important. That didn't happen. So, the exact industrialization didn't take place in India during the Britishers' rule. British rulers did not pay any attention for their promotion, as they always wanted Indians to be dependent on Britain. Why Britishers didn't promote industrialization in India? Because they want Indians must be dependent on Britain, must depend more on Britain for the supply of capital goods and heavy equipments. If they do much changes in the field of industrialization, then what will happen? If they promote Indian industries, then what will happen? Indians won't depend Britain for the supply of capital goods and heavy equipments. That is why they didn't promote industrialization inside India. So, lack of capital goods. What is the capital goods? Capital goods means here machine tools. They didn't promote more industries which can produce more machine tools, as well as more training to Indian youths. They didn't give anything. They didn't train our people. They didn't make any changes in the capital goods and capital resources. They didn't invest anything at all. Why? Because they wanted to sell more capital goods and heavy equipments from Britain. That is why they didn't promote industrialization in India. Then we can move on to the next point. Low contribution gross to domestic product. Okay, low contribution gross domestic product. Okay, GDP, gross domestic product. What happened? The growth rate of the new industrial sector and its contribution to the GDP remained very small. India's GDP was not doing anything good. Okay, the overall production and services in our country declined. It didn't see its growth during the period of Britishers' rule. GDP went down. Then limited role of public sector. Public sector, there were no enough public sector participation in an Indian economy. That is what actually limited role of public sector. The limited area of operation of the public sector was also a significant reason for drawback of the industrial sector. The limited area of operation of the public sector. So, public sector, there are many public sector in India right now. Indian Railway is there, then lot of there are BHL is there, okay, then NTPC is there. So many Indian Airways are there. All those are actually the public sector. So, at that time, the involvement of public sector was very less. Okay, that also was the reason for the decline of industrial sector in India. The public sector remained confined only to the railways, power generation, communication, ports and some other departmental undertakings. Okay, we had that time Britishers rule. At that time we had some public sectors, but mainly in the field of railway, transport, power generation, communication, ports and some other departmental undertakings which can help the Britishers to control India or rule India well. They didn't invest in other fields. All these fields were supporting Indian Railways, supporting power generation, all those were communication and ports, all those were supporting Britishers' rule in India. Okay, that is why they could control India's rule at least 200 years. They could control India at least for 200 years. Finally, it can be concluded that India remained backward in the industrial sector during the British rule. During the British rule, India's economic condition was worst. Actually, it was not doing good, and we experienced industrial backwardness during the time of Britishers' rule in India. So, I trust you understood all these points. The limited role of public sector, that is one of the main reason, and after that they didn't promote industrialization. Overall, we can say the GDP, the production and the services of goods in our country was very low. So, Indian economy faced low GDP level. That point you need to remember. Modern industries operating during independence. We can see what was the modern industries. Okay, what were the modern industries operating during independence? Due to initiative of the private sector slowly started initiating new industries in India at that time. Modern industries started to come up during the second half of the 19th century. During the second half of 19th century, more private companies came to India and they started in their industries in India. The industries established in this period were mainly confined to cotton textiles. In those days, industries were mainly cotton, textile and jute mills, mainly cotton, textiles and jute mills. Many cotton, textiles industries and jute mills started in India, mainly in the West Bengal area. Nowadays, that is West Bengal and Bangladesh. In those area, many cotton and jute industries came, and also in Gujarat, Mumbai, all those part also started many industries. Okay, they were promoting cotton, textiles and jute mills. Textiles mainly we can see in Mumbai, Gujarat side, and jute mills mainly we can see in West Bengal side. So, but their progress remained very slow at that time. Their progress was very slow. They didn't see fast changes in their growth. We could not see. The cotton textile mills were mainly dominated by Indians and were located in the western parts of the country. So, cotton textile mills were mainly dominated by Indians. Indians ran such type of cotton industries mainly, and it were the western parts of the country, mainly in Maharashtra and in Gujarat. The jute mills dominated by the foreigners. Jute mills dominated, mainly the jute mills. Who started that? Started by foreigners, were mainly concentrated in Bengal area, the present day, that is actually West Bengal, Calcutta area, and in the Bangladesh. Okay, the major breakthrough, what happened? The major breakthrough was the setting up of Tata Iron and Steel Company. That is one of the major important breakthrough. The changes, transition was the setting up of Tata Iron and Steel Company. It is also in short form known as TISCO, Tata Iron and Steel company in the year 1907. Where did the Tata started first Tata Iron and Steel Company? It started in 1907 in Jamshedpur in Bihar. A few other industries in the fields of sugar, cement, paper, etc. also came up after the Second World War. After the Second World War means after 1947, what happened? More companies came up, mainly in the field of the sugar companies, cement, paper, etc. all those. So we could see after the second half of the 19th century, there were more companies came to India. Okay, so that is what actually we did study in this part. So foreign trade, what happened in foreign trade? India has been an important trading nation since ancient times. Ancient time onwards, actually India were doing business with many countries, even with the Arabian countries and with some other countries like China, Ceylon, some other countries, and European countries also. With some European countries also we did business. Okay, so however, the restrictive policy adopted by the colonial government adversely affected the structure, composition and volume of India's foreign trade. India's foreign trade's decline we can see during the time of Britishers' rule, due to their new economic policies, due to their unwanted economic policies, that all those destroyed India's trade, foreign trade, as well as India's domestic industries. Okay, that we have already studied. The state of India's foreign trade during British rule is discussed as under. So we can see what happened and what was the position of India's economy at that time. Exporter of primary products and importer of finished goods, that was actually Britishers changed our economy like that. We were after the Britishers rule, what happened? Britishers forced us to export primary products, means raw materials export from India. Therefore, Britishers forced our farmers to produce more cash crops rather than food crops. Then Britishers promoted import of finished goods. Import of finished goods from where? From Britain. India became an exporter of primary products such as raw silk, cotton, wool, sugar, indigo, jute, etc. We exported to other country, mainly to Britain, and an importer of finished consumer goods like cotton, silk and woolen cloths and capital goods like light machinery produced in British industries. We imported finished products, finished clothes and everything from the Britain. Okay, so we were actually exporting raw materials to Britain. Then the Britain's companies prepared it and made it finished products. After what happened, they sent all those finished products to India, and all those industries were making lot of money, and Britain's economy went up. It was actually developing and totally developed. So India's economy was finding its worst time. Okay, so that is what actually we studied in this area. So British government maintained a monopoly control over India's exports and imports. They were ruling our country and we were the colony. So we experienced lot of troubles in our country. Britain's monopoly destroyed our India's export import business, everything. So they were making new policies to develop Britain's economy. So their ultimate aim was not to promote India's economy. They created export raw materials from India and import finished products from Britain, so that Britain can get either way the profit. Okay, so more than 60% of India's foreign trade was restricted to Britain. while the rest was allowed with a few other countries like China, Ceylon, Sri Lanka. The major part of our India's major part of export was only to Britain. It was only to Britain, while the rest was allowed with a few other countries like China, Ceylon and Persia. Persia means Iran. So major part of the export was confined to Britain, restricted to Britain. That happened. The opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. Suez Canal, there is a canal, okay, man-made canal, that is Suez Canal, opened in 1869, served as a direct route to the ships operating between India and Britain. After that, after the opening of Suez Canal in 1869, this Suez Canal opened, okay. After the opening of this Suez Canal 1869, what happened? Britain could save more money, okay. Before they were actually they have done long journey to reach to India, but after the opening of Suez Canal, the halfways they could save. Before they were coming to India, it's like this, it was coming, India was like this, okay. So after that, coming from here, they saved the time, then they also saved money, more money. They could easily reach to India. They could easily reach to India, okay. So you understood, okay. So they could easily reach to India. The next step we can see. Drain of Indian wealth during British rule. How the Britishers looted, exploited and plundered India's wealth to their country, that we needed to know. Drain. How did they drain India's wealth during Britishers rule? Under the British rule, India became an exporter of primary products, that we have already discussed, that raw material they have taken from this country and finished goods came from Britain to our country. There was a huge export surplus due to excess exports. So more products we were actually, more agricultural products, raw materials, jute, then more cotton sales, all those we were exporting to their country. So the surplus was the export, okay. How our export surplus was used? How the surplus means what? Surplus means more, okay, the more, okay, excessive, okay, to make payments for expenses incurred by an office set up by the colonial government in Britain. So what they did? To make payments for expenses. So more money they made, and all those money they used for the colonial government's benefit. Their own business they were nurturing and nourishing by using India's wealth. To meet expenses on war, the Britishers conducted many wars in India. So all those money, for that they found money from India alone, okay, the British government, to import invisible items, a lot of so many unwanted invisible items they exported from Britain to India. That is what are the main points. So see, we did study about the Suez Canal, trade through Suez Canal. Suez Canal is an artificial waterway running from north to south across the Isthmus of Suez in northeastern Egypt, okay. So this isthmus means the tip, okay, tip. You know that actually Kanyakumari is the tip of India. So like that actually. So there were an isthmus. So from that actually what they made, after making this Suez Canal, so Britain could reach India very easily. They could save time and money. The opening of Suez Canal in 1869 reduced the cost of transportation and made access to the Indian market easier. They could reach, the finished products could reach to India very easily. So the products found very less time to reach India. That is what I said. The opening of Suez Canal in 1869 reduced the cost of transportation. The cost of transportation and made access to the Indian market more easier. The canal provided a direct trade route for ships operating between Britain and India. So, from Britain to India and India to Britain, all those ships with more goods could easily reach to Britain as well as to India and avoided the need to sail around Africa. So, after the opening of the Suez Canal, the ships need not go around or cover the African continent. Before it was a long journey. Okay, after the opening of the Suez Canal, so they could save time and money. Strategically and economically, it is one of the most important waterways in the world. You can check more about the Suez Canal and read about and understand more about the Suez Canal. That is a man-made canal. After the opening of this canal, Britain could save time and money. So it was easy for them to take more raw materials from our country to their country, and from their country to more finished goods reached very easily to India, okay, through the Suez Canal, so that they could save time and money. That is what actually we have studied in this lesson. We studied in this lesson, okay. So I trust you remembered all these points. I request you to go through the lesson once more and understand it properly. Thank you so much.